Okay, this KOINE video covers something that we'll find very helpful. Again, the adjective as a part of speech. I'll write that here, adjective. And it simply modifies a noun or substantive, however you want to use it. But not being clergy and simply an educator, a businessman, and like all of us who are outside of what we would call professional religious leaders, clergy, things like that. We just find the text very helpful. But in this small little beginner's grammar of the Greek New Testament, a 1923 book, which you can find it online now in a portable document format, free of charge, I suppose. It's not in demand, but it says adjectives agree with the substantives which they modify in gender, number, and case. And this more contemporary book by Samuel Lamerson, English Grammar to Ace New Testament Greek, and I believe I can recall here, it was published 10 years ago in 2004, copyrighted. It says adjectives will match the noun that they refer to in gender, number, and case. So how will KOINE help us who would just simply like to know the text and would rather not banter among the talkers, and those that prefer tacit knowledge rather than explicit knowledge? So in this text, 1 Corinthians 13:10, we have in our good, useful, common, popular translation, King James Version, that which is perfect is come. And then in the KOINE English Version, the complete, and what's missing is the noun that this word complete modifies, might come. So here the word perfect and complete are referring to the same word. It's from this word teleon, and however you pronounce that's just wonderful by me. But it's a word from which teleology or a teleological argument is quite developed today in use with those who argue on behalf of creation. But this word perfect is actually an adjective. And here in the common text, when you look it up in the KOINE common Greek New Testament, you'll see it's the complete, and it's neuter. That is, it's not masculine, it's not feminine, it's neuter. Well, some have, all have some types of opinions, I suppose, which are good for discussion, especially if they indicate a desire to learn and to know what the text says, rather than just simply banter in futile argumentation, which, since the complete thing has come, then that later passive action of working down or finding it no longer according to work, that is, it doesn't contribute any longer to what is now complete. The letter from which this is taken doesn't have the word Bible in it, although that's one of the arguments, the complete Bible. But the word Bible in the KOINE is neuter, so that's closer. That's closer. And then, of course, some say the perfect, that which is perfect is come, the complete thing, and some say Jesus. And of course, I suppose if we spoke of him as what, he would definitely be the complete thing. I'm certain he's not incomplete. However, the letter that is under discussion is something Paul began and introduced and spoke of the testimony of Christ in verse 6 in the first chapter. Now, it's not common for people to go that far back. It is very common today when we write papers to have a thesis sentence, to have a topic. And Paul's thesis and topic centered around the testimony of Christ. So in the book, this brief letter, this letter, that is, I should say, of Corinthians, we have something stated very plainly, and it's when the complete testimony, and yes, that fits the requirement of an adjective, that it agree in gender and number and case. So when the complete testimony, and of course that's the testimony of Christ, none disputed. So what's the working down or the inactivity, the work that's now been made inactive? Well, it's all that Paul was speaking about in that very dramatic environment in Corinth, where all of those sources of knowledge, prophecies, languages were all being used, working to complete this testimony. Now, when they stopped working to this end, when they stopped working to this end, that is to the establishment, you can read that in the first chapter, and obviously here the completion, to bring this testimony to its perfect state, or to be complete, which is what the word perfect there refers to. That end, once this was accomplished, and I don't really know any Christian of any stripe that asserts the testimony of Christ is incomplete. That is, that anyone would go out and want another testimony or another testament or another script or text. So practically speaking, all Christians accept the Bible as the books we have today, so canonized, but more specifically, and not for the purpose of gaining one-upsmanship on someone in some futile argument that's useless, because it doesn't contribute. It's not the work of bringing this to completion. So when we go out and carry out the Great Commission, for example, we're teaching people and conveying this complete testimony. We're not conveying part of it. We're not proposing part of it is in the Bible and some of it's somewhere else outside the Bible. The Bible is a product of the Holy Spirit, and we don't suggest that it's incomplete. That is the testimony of Christ. So this is a teaching process. And again, it certainly isn't involved when you study the KOINE, which is what I Am KOINE is about. And when you study it and actually go out to make a disciple, you don't ask the empty question of have something ceased or does it continue? If you needed a question, that is, if you ask about gifts or the outward whatever people are referring to, first of all, that's not a good question. It just causes what we know to be cognitive dissonance, where the person's now disturbed and they're stressing out, and then they just finally pick A or pick B to relieve it. And so if you're around a group of people and they say that, for example, gifts have ceased, then you can relax. You can say, well, now that I picked, I can relax. Or you're around this group, you pick this side, and it gives you the same relief. So you're just finally glad to get this. Well, that was all artificially constructed, and it created a dissonance, which is a very stressful state of mind that you relieve by just picking a false option. Neither of those options are even in the text that Paul refers to. So if you wanted to ask one, a good question would be about spiritual men, and we're spiritual men, so here's spiritual men, which is what Paul taught about. Spiritual men were used, and they worked that which they were empowered to do, worked toward completing the testimony, and that's the testimony of Christ. And it established it, as Paul said in the first chapter, 6th verse of the introduction of his letter as he opened it up. So they worked to this end. Now that that has been completed, and no Christian disputes that, that work no longer contributes to it. So all the work you hear people doing to say that they have self-assert some gift, or someone works to negate the assertion that someone makes about having a gift by working to say they don't have a gift, none of that necessarily is what we've been entrusted today. So today we have a complete testimony of Christ. That's complete. And we have a commission. So we are commissioned to go out and we make disciples. And that all happens quite efficiently. That's where all the work goes now. All the work is to this end, and all of this is ultimately for God's glory. So whatever the work is, it seems to be a lot of energy invested in a false option, because if you say gifts haven't ceased, that is, gifts that contribute knowledge, that contribute information, that communicate, it would only be possible to the extent the testimony of Christ was incomplete. And where that would be incomplete, this would be a compensatory function to compensate for that testimony not being completed. But it is completed, and we have it on record, and that's not a lower grade of Christianity to say our Christianity is text-based and our Christianity is only according to the scripts that are scripted for us and remain on record. That's actually the highest level of Christianity. All other faiths are text-less, script-less faiths or assertions. And again, being a businessman, being a citizen and not a professional clergy, and certainly someone who embraces education rather than mental trickeries and playing games on myself and self-deception and then on others to market an illusion, whether it's one side or the other side of a bad argument or a bad question. That's not our work. Our work is educational. And anyway, that's just show you that bothering with an adjective and bothering with KOINE might be a labor, I suppose, but it's definitely a work that advances the truth about Christ, that his testimony is complete. The text also says in the book of Acts that he did not leave himself without a testimony, literally leave himself a void testimony. It's here, it was completed, and what was lacking in that temporal episode at Corinth was its completion among them, and it certainly was a work in that very temporary episode. We don't find that confusion and nonsense going on in Ephesus or in the church at Rome or Thessalonica or anywhere else. So that would help understand what Paul was actually referring to, the objective of the work, and according to what was it? And it was according to the accomplishment and establishment of that complete testament. So that's enough. Enjoy this KOINE lesson. It comes from an objective observation without a religious lens.